We're going to now begin our question and answer period. We have until 6 o'clock, which will give us approximately an hour. And I'm going to begin by asking Paul a question because he was good enough to curtail some of his remarks, but there's something specific I wanted to ask him. You just described, Paul, on this side of being in a fight where people tell you you can't win it. You referenced the March 17th meeting, but you were also the public face of SDI in the immediate aftermath of Reagan's announcement. And I'd like you to tell people a bit about what that was like, what the United States was like at that moment, and the fact that we were the only people, apparently, that knew what the hell was going on.
Well, I guess that could be a long subject. I mean, we were the only civilians, and so it came to my good luck that the day after Reagan's speech, CBS News went hunting for some civilians who knew what Reagan was talking about, and they tried the Heritage Foundation. I went to a conference of the Heritage Foundation last week on the 30th anniversary of the SDI. How many people were there? What do you think? 35 people. They had more generals speaking than they had people in the audience. So this is the conference here, which is the 30th anniversary conference recognizing the Strategic Defense Initiative. And at that time, the news producer of CBS called up the Heritage Foundation and to get a spokesman and was told, this is the Fusion Energy Foundation's thing. You should call them. So when I went to the conference last week, I thanked them for their for giving me the good luck to be the first civilian on TV news at that time. But it's an indication, and some of them were talking about it even last week, it's an indication of how rapidly that program came under attack, and Lynn came under attack for it, that what we're dealing with 30 years later is technologies. We're not dealing in any sense with the real mobilized capability of the United States or a mobilized culture or capability among the population. We have to inject that in the way we're doing now with a still higher task, which has been discussed at length here in terms of the SDE. But the reason for that is just how rapidly and how across the board this thing was attacked. Now, we're as I was trying to indicate, we're in a comparable situation where the people who most are being affected by us are simply convinced at the moment that Wall Street and the City of London have more money to spend to stop them, and that the White House is more determined and the Treasury more determined to stop them than they could possibly be to get this kind of thing passed. We are the difference. We're actively particularly in the last few months, making the difference. In this situation, it will not be as it was with the SDI, where it could be broken into technologies. I mean, we've gone through what else has to be done. So maybe that's one way to answer.
Do we have any questions? Say, go with the first question.
Hi, my name is Stephen Machette, and I'm listening to what you want to do to reenact fiscal sanity in the United States. But what I do not understand is why no one starts with the whole game. The game begins with the Federal Reserve, and until you nationalize the Federal Reserve, anything and everything you do plays into their game. We need to nationalize the Federal Reserve. We need to make all the employees who work at the Federal Reserve work exclusively for the United States, not where we allow foreign banks from the Jesuits to the Bank of England to sit here and play games with our currency, get us to go around the world and allow our bankers to have one idea and to allow our government to speak with a different tongue. I just do not, and I'm asking in an open question, why we do not change the rules, the procedural rules of the game. It's like playing football. First down, first play, you nationalize the Federal Reserve. Second play, you get rid of all foreign bank interest inside our currency, And this will make, by the way, this will make the world more competitive. Each nation should have their own currency, and each nation should play that game. If you're going to have a world currency, you need to have no borders, where everyone could work wherever the work is. Until you have that, we will never have the sanity that all of us wish to have. We sit here and we talk about the first U.S. bank. The first U.S. bank was foreign-owned, as well as domestically owned. And we have never learned the lessons. Instead, what we do is we want to perpetuate our great-grandparents' world. We don't live in that world. We live in a world of instant communication that's in desperate need of arts and sciences, that's in desperate need of feeding its people, that's in desperate need of removing the hate and fear. And I just really do not understand it. I'm getting older, and at some point, someone's got to look and say, this man may be right. The Federal Reserve is not federally owned. It's a game that was instituted in 1913 and was put in, and it's a cartel, if nothing else. And why don't people change that first? Okay. Second down, I told you. Third down, we bring back the Spiegel Act.
We got the question.
Yeah, my act is, why don't people understand? Why doesn't anyone want to nationalize the Federal Reserve?
Okay.
That's my question.
Let's take the question.
Well, there's a few parts to that question, and I'll just start at, I think, the beginning, which is that the wiping out of a lot of these member banks of the Federal Reserve System, since I don't know what percentage of their assets are actually involved in nothing, is going to be a process which then determines the next step. A lot of the valid commercial bank system of the country, I think the commercial banks own only 14% of the actual so-called capital. The rest is all this crazy derivatives. When we put through Glass-Steagall, we're going to be wiping out so much, it's not going to be completely clear what the commercial banking system of the United States is going to look like, nor is it going to be clear what the 12 reserve districts with the Federal Reserve is going to look like. That being said, it's probably going to be two different options. Either those who are deciding to build the nation and get together with us and with themselves and design a new credit system, a new Bank of the United States that's not the Federal Reserve monetizing various securities that occur, and these days really bad securities, but making something happen, the intention to directly lend for productivity. It may operate, that system, those who decide it will determine exactly what the transition process is. Now, after Glass-Steagall, the Federal Reserve, if it's allowed to, for an undetermined period, act in parallel with a credit institution, which may be politically expedient due to the fact that in one act dealing with the whole issue of currency, the fact that the Federal Reserve accepts some deposits, and the fact that the Federal Reserve has various discount functions and so forth. We may want to establish the Bank of the United States as the credit system, which then will act in parallel for a certain period of time with and making use of and a subservient Federal Reserve district groups. Or we just nationalize it, as you're saying. We just directly, in one act, get rid of all the crap from the Federal Reserve Act, give it a haircut, give it a bath, et cetera, et cetera. Real messy operation, but we just convert the 12 Federal Reserve districts. We'll have to make a whole bunch of amendments. We're going to have to fire almost 99% of the whole staff. Whatever process, whether it acts in parallel and then finally goes out of existence, and because and Lyndon LaRouche said to me a couple of weeks ago, the name of the Federal Reserve is so poison, of course. We want a Bank of the United States. Now, you're incorrect in one thing about the first part of your question. Henry Clay, and he was in 1811, when he was a little younger, he attacked the Bank of the United States and said, it's foreign-owned, it's 70% foreign-owned. And it was at that point foreign-owned, as far as 70%, and the U.S. government made a killing selling its share to the foreigners, and we made more profit with that bank than any private profit. The amount that the bank it profited the nation not in profit of gold, but in profit of developing the industries, the iron forges, the great canal systems. We used money of some people in Europe at that time where they were in warfare, they had no security of their money, so they bought a share of our bank, and the bank lent out, therefore, then the credit, not gold. It lent it out for all the purposes of national industry. So the purpose of the bank is what's key. And the Bank of the United States, as I went through in this opening briefly, this was a principle that will remain regardless of where the future takes us. Because the issue is credit in the sense of you need to have a system where you're tying the future productivity to the financial system.
Can I just say one thing? The issue is not credit. The issue is currency. What currency is really what gets someone to do something. What will make you go do something? And at that point, that's what the banks do. They issue the currency that we accept for giving up our time and that we accept for giving up possessions. And
well,
that's the job of the Federal Reserve, to distribute that currency.
Go ahead. Let me just say how we're going to proceed so people know, because there are many people behind you. People will ask a question, there'll be a response, and discussion can occur after the panel with the various speakers, just so we're clear, because there's too many people waiting. But, so, fine, yeah, continue to take it up. I just wanted that to be clear so everybody else who's waiting there is getting steam will not calm down.
This will just be a minute. I would just say don't, there you are, don't reject all of U.S. history out of hand. The kind of thing that you're describing, we've never had in the history of the United States. Can I say something? Can I say something? The kind of thing you're describing, we've never had. What we're trying to get enacted and fight for, and you know there's more to it than the first step, the Glass-Steagall step, is to do what has been done successfully, what we can make clear to everyone, elected and on down, has been done successfully, has made this country in the past the leading economy in the world, has given it the leading infrastructure in the world in the past. We're essentially, as Lynn often says, reinstituting policies which absolutely have worked in U.S. history. Neither the First National Bank nor the Second National Bank was a nationalized bank, and Roosevelt certainly did not manage or apparently even try to nationalize the Federal Reserve, yet he made it do what he wanted it to do. And those policies which actually produced the greatness of this economy when we had it, that's what we're fighting for. We can't really deal with things which just put all of U.S. history aside and say, let's try a Ginsu knife which has never, which is not only 1999 in 3 payments, but has never been done. That's all.
Let's go out to dinner.
Yeah, Next question. No, but we can't, Stephen, but we can't do it because we got, right? Okay. Okay, next question.
I'm not really sure who to direct my question to, but I guess whoever thinks that they can answer it best can embark upon that. My question is, considering the fact that a lot of people are so apathetic, and that's just a common strain among many people throughout all mankind, to just submit to these kinds of tyrannical rules because it's easier to not think and to not act and to not innovate. Once we initiate Glass-Steagall, once we have a lot of these systems in place and processes for advancing humanity, what can we do to safeguard against these forces that are always trying to take over and to rule over us? And how can we convince people, sort of in a permanent manner, that they have to go out and actively participate in the world and not just be subject to these kinds of forces? And also, secondly, if we nationalize, as the gentleman said, either the Treasury, which, that there's debate about, what the direction for that would be, but also for the national bank, how do we protect who controls it? And I guess sort of for clarification, are the American taxpayers in control of it, or who exactly owns it once it's established? Thank you.
And this will cover the last one too. I'll start with the end of your question. The principle of the Constitution is primary, and that's why this Bank of the United States draft legislation is written the way that it is. Because as soon as you try to get into explaining every final detail, you're really wasting your time. Because if we don't have the intention, as I started out with the nation building, you're never going to have the system run correctly anyway. Even if you've got the perfect piece of legislation, it's worthless. But your real question, I think, is a very good one. We have to build a new generation of productive citizens with this plan, with this NWAPA 21 plan. There's no way that we can have a functional youth generation out there today unless we rediscover what it means to build wealth. And really the issue is the mind. If you don't have industry, national industry and science, there's no basis to actually have a class of citizens that are making discoveries and discoveries in art and science if you don't have a nation state that's moving forward, which is what this plan is. Gottfried Leibniz, who began the nation-state movement in Europe in a real way with his scientific academies, his academies were based on real application of discovery for all mankind. Newton's academy in England and other ones, it was just curiosity, making little trinkets here and there. It was not moving everything forward. So this will be a laboratory. NWAPA 21 will be a laboratory for discovery, because all of the geology, all of the application of this huge water project, the study of how to change the greening of the desert, all the materials that are going to go into the whole thing. A new generation of wealth will make something permanent. Any kind of short-term thing won't work.
Yeah, my name is Brian Jones. When I think of FDR, like a lot of neophytes do, they think of Illuminati families, they think of bloodlines, they think of social policies that were implemented that are still doing a lot of damage today. And we're quite unknowing about anything good that came out of him. So I was wondering if you could, since you guys know a lot about this, if you could expound on how some good came out of this. Glass.
Well, I think that the best thing to look at that is what happens if you don't apply FDR policies. Because in Europe in the 1930s, where we were hit by the Depression equally like the United States, there was no FDR. And instead there was Mussolini, Hitler, the Vichy government in France, Franco. And I think that the propaganda which was unleashed after the Second World War by the banking system, by the British Empire, by Wall Street, by the City of London to blacken the image of Roosevelt was gigantic. I mean, the whole Congress of Cultural Freedom, which was the largest cultural manipulation project probably in the history of civilization, was designed entirely to destroy the axioms which had made it possible in the population to accept Roosevelt. Now, this was a gigantic operation. It was sponsored by the CIA, the State Department. They took over the entire cultural work in Europe and probably the United States. At the height of it, they controlled 120 cultural magazines, and basically, they said we have to destroy that within the people which makes them susceptible for somebody who defends the national interest. So they had the Frankfurt School, they had Hannah Arendt, they had the idea that anybody who defends the values of the family is per definition an authoritarian character. They destroyed classical music by saying that classical music is inherently bad and you have to mix it up with modernist music. So in a certain sense, I think the books which were written about FDR, I mean, you have to understand that there is a tremendous confusion which was deliberately injected in the population so that they wouldn't know. And I think that that is something which really has to be undone, because right now everything depends that we don't go the way of Hitler. I mean, we are again in a depression. The options are still the same. You go either in the direction of the defense of the population, or you go in the direction of a new dictatorship. So I think we are at a what this one person said, at a snapping point, because people may not fully get the impact because Cyprus is far away, but there are legislation being prepared everywhere, in every government. I'm not sure about the United States, but I just this morning was reading that legislation is being prepared to have the kind of ability to take these haircuts from the deposits of everybody in every country. Now, it happens to be that hyperinflation is already doing the same thing. It's just a little bit more sneaky, because if you have hyperinflation, well, or even inflation, as you can see it with the gasoline prices, with the energy prices, that is already nibbling away from your savings. It's just a deposit cut step by step by step. And I think this will explode, because I think that only the people who follow this on a day-to-day basis are as shocked as our Japanese speaker, or the person who had the message read, Mr. Kategawa, recognized that this has been the absolute worst possible accident to do this, because the trust in the banking system has been ruined. And this will spread, and where you don't have reason to appeal to, well, people are moving once their shirt is burning, and that is happening right now. So I think that we have to really make sure that the real policies of FDR, which after all did end the depression, it did create full employment, it did go with the New Deal, it did go with the TVA. And that model goes, after all, back to Henry H. Carey, which was the basis of Bismarck's reforms. Germany became from a feudal state into an industrialized nation on the basis of these same policies. So we have to make a real crash program so that people understand that the history of economic revolutions and economic prosperity, it was always followed with principally the same method: a strong state, a devotion to the common good, and a high emphasis on science and technology. And I think that's the issue which we have to get very quickly across, because we can have a banking run worldwide tomorrow or in 2 weeks from now. That's how hot it is.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Erickson Nord from West Virginia. Actually, I have a sort of a two-part question. I'm really awed by all the people that are here today. And I came for the people because I hate politics, to be honest with you. But my job is I work closely with the public, and I see young adults, I see older people. And I integrate into my business, just kind of by accident or so, or on purpose sometimes, the discussion of what's going on in the country. And one of my observations is that young people, that is, let's say teens and 20s and 30s age group, don't think we have a future, and they don't understand what's going on. And many of them have told me that they can't get jobs like we've been discussing here, and they don't know what to do about it. And when I talk about Congress, they just kind of throw their hands in the air and they say, well, what do they do anyway? That's what my parents say. So my first part of my question is, or maybe just an observation, is we need to get more young people involved, especially in the school level, like high school. If they know they don't have a future, how are they going to get excited about SDI? You see. And science is rarely talked about amongst the people that I ever see. I'm a science enthusiast. In fact, I'm an ex-chemist. That's all I loved was science all my life. But the people that I talk with don't even know science. And they don't even know politics. They know iPads and iPods and all these little widget things, but they're not getting involved. And I don't know exactly how to stimulate them, but one suggestion I had was maybe visit the schools or the school boards and maybe have a program maybe once a month that people like us can come in and talk to these young folks so they can feel stimulated and hopeful. And maybe they can yell at their congressman and say, hey, wait a minute, I have a future. What am I going to do if you don't pass Glass-Steagall, for example? And related to that is our state media is awful. We're not given the information that we need to know. We're given lies, deceit, stories. I even know there's made-up stories from Fox News. I double-checked in the background to see if there was really a person that was missing or abducted. It turned out there wasn't. Yeah. So a lot of people still watch TV. I don't. I'm not even connected with it. I haven't had it for 6 years, and I don't miss it. But my clients see it, and it's just junk. Can we get maybe a television station going that can compete with this and tell the world the real story? Those are my questions.
Yeah. Dennis, you want it? Dennis will take it.
This question, the young gentleman who spoke a couple of speakers ago are asking the same question, really, and I want to say one or two things about it. How do you deal with a world in apathy? How do you deal with a world with people don't care? And so on. It's a very fundamental question. I don't know how many of you have ever had the misfortune of studying behaviorist psychology. It's almost as bad as behaviorist economics. Behaviorist psychology says you can teach a pigeon to do anything you want it to based on giving it gratification or pain, pleasure, pain. That's part one. That's true, as far as I know. I'm not a great expert on pigeons. But the second part of the argument is the part that should make your blood boil, because it says people are pigeons, and that is how people think. That is how people react. That is how people can be brainwashed. That's how they can be induced to do whatever you want them to do. Now, it is undeniably true that people can be made to act like pigeons. Or worse, just look at the White House. But the missing part of the discussion, I think this speaks to the woman who just spoke and the gentleman who was speaking before. People can be made to act like animals. It's doable. But you can't get an animal to act like a human being. Doesn't go the other way. And that tells you something about what human beings are and what the nature of the universe is. The question of mobilizing people for this war or any war is to get them emotionally involved with something that is absolutely so precious that they'll actually get excited about it and think. And the only thing that will work is touching that part of them which makes them uniquely human. It's only creativity. It's only classical culture. It's only science. It's all the same thing. And people will act and will move if they get a sense that they find that inside themselves, first of all, and second of all, that we might even win. So the idea of beginning to change the world around us, giving people a sense that ideas can, in fact, change history, and sparking that inside them is the only thing that's going to make a political movement that's going to work. There are no gimmicks that are going to function in any way. The world can and will change dramatically from one moment to the next. I take that to be one of the points that Paul was making about the SDI lesson. All of a sudden, and believe me, the day after March 23rd, there were a whole lot more converts to the SDI than there were a week before, when we were very alone. You know the old story, right? You know, as soon as you start winning, you say, oh, I've been with you all along. Yeah, oh, I've been a LaRouche all along. Oh, yeah, right? So the issue is how to do what we know has to be done. We've got one thing on our side, reality. Lynn's forecasts have been right in economics, in science, in culture, in everything. And we simply have to make sure that we are speaking to that part of people which make them human beings and not pigeons. I think that's the secret to victory.
We're going to have a second respondent to that question, particularly the first part of the question on youth and their lack of a sense of future. And this is Diane Sayer, former congressional candidate from New Jersey, who's presently candidate for governor against Chris Christie. Diane?
Thanks. I think in part that question was actually addressed in a very powerful way by the conference we held in New York City, by the profound effect of classical music on the participants in the conference. And I was thinking it also raises a question that I wanted to ask Helga to discuss, because we are clearly at a breaking point in many directions. The Cyprus mistake that they've made could be the trigger. And there was a breaking point which some of us are old enough to remember, which occurred in 1989, which Mr. LaRouche had forecast in 1988 at his famous speech at the Kempinski Hotel, where he called for the reunification of Germany. And what occurred when the Berlin Wall collapsed was that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which I don't think, and Helga and others who were in Germany can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that Schiller and Beethoven were the primary dominant popular culture in Germany in the late 1980s. But because you had a profound moment where people had seen what had happened in Tiananmen Square, and where people thought literally they could be mowed over by tanks, and they chose that they were going to go out in massive numbers, bigger than all of the candlelight vigils that had led into this process, and people were ennobled to conduct themselves in a profound way and to look for a profound culture. And I think younger people, frankly, are particularly susceptible to that when people get a glimmer of what it means to actually be a human being and not an animal, they respond to that. If someone has a choice between being a rat and being Albert Einstein or Beethoven, I think it's pretty clear what they're going to choose. And I think the moment that we are on the brink of is such a moment, and therefore it's crucial, every person in this room, that nothing that you do which is truthful is going to be lost, because as the system disintegrates, what we represent is, as was just said earlier, is what will become hegemonic. But this question of classical music in particular, which is not the words, it's the idea, and it's not the sounds, and it's not the notes. This has a power to resonate very profoundly, and we'll observe that tonight, although there's not, as far as I know, going to be a lot of discussion on it. But I do think this breaking point and the culture, and the last thing, I was thinking about this with regard to Rand Paul, because as everyone knows, in the 2010 elections, Rand Paul swept in, and his ideas of economics are insane. It's Austrian school, it's crazy. So how is it that Rand Paul becomes the lightning rod and the vehicle with his filibuster against Obama for his decision that he can kill Americans at will using drones? And it is very much like Shelley in Defense of Poetry, where he speaks of people being like a trumpet. The trumpet itself doesn't know what it's uttering, what it represents, but it has the capacity to convey profound and impassioned conceptions regarding man and nature. And this moment, someone as imperfect as this particular senator became a rallying point because of the dynamic. So I think that's what we're actually in, and we have to remember that as we go out and fight with people who seem to be knuckleheads in the moment, because in the next moment they may not be.
Perfect. Okay, let me say the following. We're going to close the questions in terms of the people who are up there. Don't sit down. But we have about 20 minutes. Therefore, we're going to ask you to keep your questions direct. If your question's answered before you get to ask it, then you should also sit. But keep in mind what I just said. We're going to have to get finished by just after 6. We're coming back for the musical performance this evening. The chorus members have to be back at 7 o'clock sharp. So your situation is going to be harrowing. Okay? So just know this. So because we have to stay on schedule for the evening. So with that said, please be direct and short with your questions, and we'll try to comply with the answers. Go ahead.
I'm Richard Burden from the National Center. This is with respect to Dennis Small's presentation. He put up a map of the part of the world, well, really the world land bridge. It showed routes which had been already existing and those which needed to be built. There were plenty of green routes already existing going from China to Europe. I was going to ask, what are the condition of those? Are they real development corridors with new plexes, thriving cities, heavy industrial production? Or are they just tracks, and poor ones at that creak along with loads of cheap goods manufactured in China heading to Europe, and with money and titles to real estate and mineral rights flowing the other way? And would any of that change if we were to burrow underneath the Bering Strait and build it into North America?
Well, I think that the intention is what counts, and the intention of the governments of Asia is to go in the direction of development corridors. As a matter of fact, there was just now in Moscow a conference of the Moscow Economic Forum where a paper was presented from the Izborsk Club, and they proposed a credit system in the tradition of Glass-Steagall of Roosevelt. Now, this is a very important thing because the fight between the oligarchs in Russia, for example, and the people who want to have the development has been fierce. As a matter of fact, I just was told half an hour ago that in London, Berezovsky, who is one of the key oligarchs, was found murdered or dead in his apartment. Now, we have to watch what that signifies because, you know, being murdered in London is not necessarily clear who is the force which did that. I mean, I would say there were people hanging under the Friars Bridge from the P2 Lodge before. So I think that the battle which way it goes is not decided. It's not decided entirely in China. It's sitting on the edge. But if you look at the amount of investment in high technology, in, for example, HTR, going on in China, they are building now the first functioning fourth generation high temperature reactor, a technology which was developed in Germany because of greenie insanity, was not developed and not built there. So when Professor Schulten recognized that it was not realizable in Germany, he gave the full technology with the keys to the Chinese. And the Japanese are now building new nuclear reactors. The Chinese are totally committed to develop the interior of their country. I think that there are many projects of the original Eurasian land bridge, which we published in 1990-91, are actually in different states of development. I mean, we produced a video a while ago where you confront the tremendous drive for development of Asia as totally compared to the non-development of the transatlantic sector. So while it's not perfect, I think the vector of direction is overwhelmingly in the direction of development in Asia, and unfortunately not in the transatlantic world.
Yes, hi, Jean-Philippe Lebleu from Montreal, organizer. I've also been helping to organize weekly meetings in Haiti, Cap Haitien more particularly. So I had a question regarding the Bank of the United States, but also its, I guess, its international scope, because Dennis Small showed at the beginning the level of poverty in the world, but among those poor people, there's a significant amount of peasants. So they have a land. So with NWAPA-style projects in various areas of the world, like Haiti, for example, you could really kickstart a national agro-industrial complex to be developed, and was wondering if, whether in the past or if in the future, this idea of the Bank of the United States can be applied to actually kickstart an economy like in Haiti, whose sovereignty is almost zero, and will probably take a long time and a lot of strength before being able to fight stuff like the World Trade Organization or other various institutions like that.
The reason for the consultations is that at 6:01, the string quartet is going to come up on the stage and play the rest of you out of here. So we're basically trying to go quickly. Yes, go ahead.
Countries like Haiti can't do it alone. It's not that there's a flaw with the concept. The problem is the world has gone so far, as with all of Africa. It's only going to work in the context of a global change. I emphasized at the beginning, as you know, as Lynn has said repeatedly over and over again, that special responsibility falls upon the United States to change the world situation. Take it again from the top. You look at the world situation. Currently, total world grain production is 0.375 tons per capita, according to the World Bank, 375 kilograms per capita. Now, that's at the very least half of what it needs to be. It probably should be more than that, because as you make a transition to a more advanced economy, it is not the case that a ton of grain equals a ton of grain equals a ton of grain. You can take a ton of grain of wheat and produce bread, and I like bread, but the efficiency actually in terms of human cognitive functioning is you need animal protein. So you're going to need to do exactly what the greenies tell you not to do. In fact, a good rule of thumb, if the greenies say don't do it and you'll probably be okay. Now, better to think it through a little further, but that's not a bad starting point. So what you need is minimally something like 0.75 or up to a metric ton of grain per capita for the world, not for 7 billion, but for 11 billion people. What are you going to need to do? You have to triple world food production, which you may recall this is something that Helga promoted explicitly a couple of years back. And this addresses countries like Haiti. Haiti is, in fact, the basket case. It has been turned into a basket case. It has been turned into a basket case intentionally in part because it was the first republic in the Americas after the United States, through Toussaint Louverture and so on, that went the direction of the American system. So the country was burnt to the ground by the British and the French colonialists and so on. So we indeed have a debt of gratitude towards Haiti which must be paid back, and the way to do it is by fulfilling our own constitutional purpose. On the basis of that kind of world reactivation, you can absolutely set in place a national bank in countries like Haiti, as can be done in the entire continent of Africa and many other parts around the world. But it's got to be done on a global basis. Take it from the top. That's my advice.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm from South Carolina. This is more of a spiritual question. What is I've been in contact with my senator's office, and I just want to know what's preventing what's preventing the people in a political position from moving forward with Glass-Steagall and SDI? Is it money? Is it doubt? Is it greed? I mean, I know it's something deeper, but I talk with them and I feel like it's just going in one ear and out the other. So I just want to know what you see.
Look, the immediate thing that's preventing them is money, right? Their dependence on a money economy and the way in which Wall Street, City of London, affiliated financial interests have moved into completely controlling situations in terms of funding campaigns. As I said, the National Public Radio showed in detail one night last week that $350 million were spent in one congressional cycle just to get Glass-Steagall repealed. That's escalated since then. So the immediate barrier you're talking about is money, but obviously that's not the way to break through it. The way to break through it is leadership. And the only thing that has been changing the situation with respect to the Congress in the recent months is leadership, and particularly over the last week with a lot of those people who'd been showing leadership, like the delegations from South Dakota and the other places where they've really been fighting from the bottom to get the legislators to move. That has changed the situation, which otherwise was being defined purely and simply by, what the press in Washington keeps saying. Glass-Steagall won't pass because there's too much money. John McCain comes out and says it publicly to Bill Jones at a press conference. Glass-Steagall, I'm totally for it, he said, but it won't pass the Senate because the power of the financial interests here is too strong. It's the financial interest directly against leadership. Now, I wanted to read one letter, which I should have read before, but was short of time because it was sent to this conference as well as to the Congress by someone who wanted to come here and speak but was prevented at the last minute from coming. He is the vice president of the Union Bank in Beulah, North Dakota, Gordon Hoffner, and his statement is regarding, March 15th, regarding support for H.R. 129. I am the past president of the Independent Community Banks of North Dakota. I am writing to you to ask you to support and co-sponsor H.R. 129, the Return to Prudent Banking Act. It is urgent that Congress intervene into the banking crisis that continues to spiral out of control. We have seen that J.P. Morgan Chase, mega losses, and the Eurozone crisis, but the only response is to continue bailouts. Instead, we must introduce sweeping re-regulation to prevent the possibility of such crises. H.R. 129 would reinstate the main provisions of FDR's Glass-Steagall, and he goes through them. And then he says a couple of examples of how the near collapse of our banking system adversely changed my $85 million bank in western North Dakota. And he described how his premium for deposit insurance went up from $8,000 a year in 2007 to $300,000 a year 3 years later. And he says regulators are pressuring all banks to increase their capital. At the same time, we are paying more FDIC insurance and have additional costs to comply with Dodd-Frank. In addition, the Federal Reserve prints money at $85 billion a month to the benefit of the big banks. We need to get our financing in order, pass H.R. 129, restoring Glass-Steagall. Now, When we talked to him, he was convinced that this would do no good whatsoever, that his bank was an $85 million bank, and that there was simply no possibility that anybody would listen. When this letter was actually presented to one member of Congress who happened to be standing among another of the members of Congress, the member who got it was waving it to the others saying, "Look at this. I love this. Look at this. Glass-Steagall." So, it's leadership. And it doesn't mean that that member of Congress or anyone else in that group is going to introduce or even co-sponsor Glass-Steagall necessarily. But it's a fight between leadership and that pressure of that financial lobby.
Yes, sir. Go to Mike.
Thank you. I'm Patrick Savidio from Connecticut, and I'll make this short. I feel right now like Washington felt on one side of that river, and I'm crossing that river, and we're going to get to the other side.
Yes, sir.
The good news is we're going to make 6 o'clock. These are short questions. I'm Dennis Nord from West Virginia. A couple of minutes ago, you heard from my wife, Kathleen. I have 2 questions, one concerning the WAPA and the other concerning food, and that's kind of a heads up for Jim Benham. He may have something to say about that. NWAPA requires us to bring water from Alaska and the Canadian Rockies down here. I would think the Canadian Parliament would have something to say about that. And since they're under the thumb of the Queen, my question is, are we going to expect some resistance from them? Because obviously the Queen doesn't want us to succeed. The food question goes like this. Much of the food in this country is GMO food. If you're not familiar with the term, GMO is genetically modified organism. The organism could be either plant or animal. An example of that is GMO corn. The biggest supplier of corn in the world is Monsanto. They have something called BT3 corn or BT23 corn, whatever it is. It was modified in order to create an insecticide in the insect's stomach when they eat it, and as a means of insect control. It's the same corn that we eat, so it's obviously not good for us. So I'm just wondering if all this GMO food is part of the oligarchs' plan to reduce the population.
I'd say yes, but I'll let Jim answer that one. Where's JP? Jean-Philippe. Jean-Philippe is here from Montreal, and he heads up our organization politically in Canada. You should speak with him afterwards, but I just say that the nation builders in Canada have got to kick out the other people and take over. There's no compromising at this point with the financial oligarchy and all of their servants. There's no compromise in the U.S. or Canada. Same thing.
Well, very quickly, not trying to dodge the issue, but the question you've asked is probably a 15, 20-minute discussion. And they tell me I got less than a minute, so why don't you see me afterwards here and we'll kick that around a bit. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Schiller Institute. Thank you all, everybody, for coming.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Judith Van Dyke, and I'm from Long Island, New York. I work with actually I run a small business association, and I talk to my customers. I have over 800, started out with 5,000, and we're down to 800 because of Obamacare. And the majority of my customers, when I tell them about what's going on out there, are clueless. They're absolutely clueless. And I tell them, well, you people are listening to the wrong channels because you're not finding out anything. And I find in my own observation that most people are not affected by what's going on unless it's actually hitting them, either them personally, that their kids are coming out of school, can't get a job, or they're losing their jobs or their homes, or they can't afford to buy the food anymore. But unless it's hitting their pocketbook, they're going about their lives and they don't want to be bothered. The hope that I do have is that I do see Obama's empire crumbling. And I do see a lot of mistakes that he's made, big ones, which are big blunders for him. And his own people who have huge podiums and are in touch with millions of people, like Jay Leno, who just had a big fight with the TV station, and they're firing him because he told some president jokes. And Fox News is looking to hire him. Now, that would be ironic. Bob Beckel, if anybody's heard of Bob Beckel, he's the biggest liberal I have ever seen in my life. I can't stand this man. But he jumped all over CBS because they did something on the Vietnam War and a plane that came down, and they were celebrating it, and he was screaming at them. These are the kind of people, as they're getting hurt themselves, are going to be our biggest advocates because they're going to help bring down that regime. And we have to hope more of them get hurt real soon.
I think we have to hear, and we began with the conference with Helga opening up the situation in Cyprus and the fact that the monetary empire is effectively going to loot all the remaining assets of any nation state that doesn't decide to declare itself, sovereign. Now, we have to act as the organizers of the leaders of the United States right now, and we can't. There's no waiting around for the general masses to somehow wake up or something. We are the organizers to organize the movers, the shakers, the political figures that could arise from the shadows and are there and need to be organized. And I just say, we're at this point right now where the whole money system could disappear overnight. We have a flag, we have a plan, we have a solution, and as things move forward, that has to be the rallying point and the driver for really the leaders of society to move this, as Paul was describing. And we're at that point right now. So I say, don't wait around for the people to get on the right channel. Talk to them individually and find the people that want to change the political direction of society. And talk to, where's our South Dakota man? Ron, where is he? Talk to Ron Wyzork.
We're now at the end of this session, and obviously everybody knows. This lady from Long Island points out something, but it's also important to remember, we just got hit by a flood up there. What happened? Well, no, it did. If you go to where the flood areas are, yes, something happened. Those people were wiped out. And what's important is to understand that what you're asking for, don't worry about it. The whirlwinds are there. In fact, what our problem is that how do we mobilize the courage to act in this situation? What's the basis of that? And so to say something in conclusion to you all, of course, remember, this is the third of these conferences. We have one in Germany, one in New York, and we have the one today. So I want Helga to come up and give you all her view of what we've done here today and what it is our vision of how to move forward has to be. Helga?
Well, I don't think the coming development will be linear. You will have tremendously sudden developments. Diane was mentioning the fall of the wall, and it's funny, but there was this guy Günter Schabowski who gave a press conference, and he wanted to announce a government plan that sometimes there would be some new travel regulation. And he said, people can travel from now on. And then the media picked it up and said, oh, the wall is opened. And then people started to go with their trabis and their, whatever vehicle they had. And they went to the border, and the border wasn't open, but it got opened through this accident. So, in the same way, I'm pretty sure that Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Schäuble did not really, and the Troika for that matter, did not really think through what would be the effect of saying we are going to steal the deposits of the little people. I think it was an accident, like Schabowski. People make, under stress, they make these mistakes, but they have tremendous consequences. So I think that you should be, while on the one side, you should be really sitting on the edge of your chair and move like you have never moved before. You know, let's escalate this process of getting the state legislators, the mayors, the city councils, other elected officials of organizations, put pressure on the Congress so that they be forced to do it, because the times will be such that all of a sudden a new situation is, and then if Glass-Steagall is the only solution on the table, the only workable plan, together with the credit system and the reconstruction of Navapa, in emergency situations, a small force which has a good thought-out plan can actually win if the only other plans are, against the people. So we should be full of confidence. I mean, don't forget that this movement didn't start yesterday, but Mr. LaRouche was the first one in the 60s to point to the long-term destruction of the cognitive powers of the youth, saying that this would lead to the collapse of society. He was probably the only man in the 60s who had that foresight. He was the only economist who in 1971 in August said, if you continue with the abolition of Bretton Woods, with the breaking from the gold standard, this will lead to a new depression and the danger of a new fascism. And we have, in the last 40 years, worked on every part of the world. Development plans for Africa. We worked with Lopez Portillo on the development of Latin America. We worked with Indira Gandhi on a 40-year development plan of India. We worked on a 50-year development plan for the Pacific Basin. After the wall came down, we developed the Eurasian Land Bridge. We have a gigantic development plan for the Middle East. And out of this, we have allies, people in every country in the world who are co-thinkers of the LaRouche movement, who right now are coming to us because they know that we are the only alternative to this globalization which is breaking apart. There was a conference following our Frankfurt conference in Iran where many people from many countries said what you are proposing for the Middle East is the only way how we can prevent that to become the cockpit of World War III. And there will be follow-up conferences which you will hear in short order, because there is an electrifying mood that this injustice which is ruling the world right now, which is killing billions of people, literally, I mean, if you count the amount of people or the number of people who have died as a result of hunger, disease, which was not necessary, you come to the billions in the last 40 years. So this system is criminal, it's unjust, and Glass-Steagall is the way to stop these criminal bankers from continuing the theft which they are now committing openly by going after the deposits of the little people. So we are not in an easy situation, where things go in a linear way, but, we are coming to the absolute moral test of mankind. Do we have enough morality, intelligence, and guts to take the power away from these people and give it back to the people of the United States and all other countries? So, while it is extremely dangerous, and, we may not exist in a couple of weeks from now if this thing goes wrong, I'm absolutely optimistic that we are at a branching point whereby the fall of the wall will look like the proverbial peanuts, because the end of the Soviet system was just a regional system, and we are now looking at the end of globalization in the form as it has taken over in the last 24 years. So we are, in a very exciting moment, and I think people should, when you listen to the concert tonight, I mean, you should listen to that music and understand that that gives you a foretaste of the kind of humanity which we can create, and it has been done in the past with the Italian Renaissance, the German classical period, and other great historical Renaissance periods. So, I think it can be done, and, you should be panicked, but you should be happy.